I guess we all have our favourites or our go-tos, a particular meal or a set of clothing, or just ways of doing things. At work we may be coasting and not particularly pushing ourselves or being pushed. Similarly, in everyday living, we may be doing the same old things in the same old ways, with little new or stimulating coming our way. Well, I'm talking, of course, about living in our comfort zone, where there's little change, minimal risk, and we feel safe and secure. For the Israelites, you could say that their time in the wilderness was kind of living in their comfort zone. Food was provided for them, the heavenly manna. They were able to worship freely with very little threat from outsiders. They knew the presence of God with them in their wanderings. Everything was very familiar and predictable. It was when they were on the move, as they crossed the River Jordan and confronted the military and spiritual strongholds of Jericho and Ai. It was then that they started to experience the real power and presence of God in the new situations they were facing. Our comfort zones are places of familiarity, where safety and security are key concerns, and they're where we tend to get our sense of well-being and belonging. They are necessary places, and we need to remember to thank God for the comforts we have. But we also need to be mindful of complacency that can creep in, and also a reliance on our own abilities and skills. We need to ask ourselves, where does God fit into our comfort zone? Is it a place where we're very conscious of him, or is he just there, almost as part of the background? Now, one of Jesus' most well-known sayings is this: I've come that they might have life and have it to the full. A lot of what we need in life and what God wants us to enjoy is found in our comfort zone. But to have life in all its fullness and abundance, well, there are times when God needs to move us out of our comfort zone. And that sounds scary, doesn't it? Partly because we're not in our comfort zone. So let's give it a positive name and call it our personal growth zone. It's where new and different things happen, and I have to react and respond to them. Sometimes the move into our growth zone can be planned and purposeful, but at other times, well, stuff just happens, doesn't it? And we're very well aware that we're no longer in our comfort zone. We can all struggle outside of our comfort zone, but living solely within our comfort zone doesn't really equip us to deal with some of the curveballs that come our way. Being outside our comfort zone also means that we can encounter God in different ways. You see, in our comfort zone, we tend to experience God in familiar and often expected ways. But in our growth zone, there's the opportunity to discover God in new and fresh and sometimes surprising ways. For the Israelites in the wilderness, they experienced God through the familiarity of the daily offerings, the great religious events and celebrations, and just the knowledge that at the heart of their life and society, there was God. This was their stability and their security, and was the predictable pattern of everyday life. But as they moved into the promised land, they discovered more of who God was, in a way that they could never know when they were stationary. They were discovering his power over nature as they crossed the Jordan, his authority over military and spiritual strongholds as the walls of Jericho crumbled before them, his holiness as they saw the effects of Achan's sin in disobeying God, and how God saw it as a communal rather than a personal sin. We could go on. They had new stories to tell on the community level as they went into the promised land. And they would later have individual tales to tell as they started to live in the promise of inheriting every place where the sole of your foot treads. Yet within the newness of their experiences, the familiar was to continue. Although they were in a new place with new challenges and new opportunities, their worship was to continue. Their way of living together under God's law was to continue. You know, we need to have a healthy understanding of the value and place of our comfort zones and all the good that brings to us. But we also need to recognise that there are things we can only learn and experience when the landscape is unfamiliar, when routines have been disrupted, when order has disappeared, and when panic is about to take over. Do I choose to go there? Not always. But I know These are often the times when I encounter and experience God in ways that are very different to my comfort zone. And they are invariably the times of real spiritual and personal growth in my life.